Good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, the 26th of January. I was struck in the reading from Paul's letter to the church in Galatia, Galatians chapter 1, going through to verse 10 of chapter 2, how Paul is chastising the people. And it would appear that they had received the good news of Jesus Christ, the pure, unadulterated gospel that Jesus is God in human form. He had been present at creation. We had, as human beings, had turned our backs on God and had gone astray. And God had then sent Jesus to be that ultimate sacrifice, a person without sin who would die for us. And our calling upon his name, believing in the acts that he has done and that he is God in human form, would give us salvation. And Paul is saying that you as the people have been led astray, particularly by those who call for circumcision. There were those who were saying, yes, Christianity is good, but you can't be a Christian unless you are circumcised. And you can't be a Christian unless you live virtually as if you are a Jew, and that you follow in every respect the law of Moses, perhaps what to eat and when to eat and how to eat and what to eat it with. And Paul is saying, but why do you change? This is not the gospel that I presented to you so long ago. And Paul goes into an explanation about how God had revealed himself to him, that Paul had started off like those who wanted to preach circumcision, and that Paul was absolutely zealous for the faith to the point of putting Christians to death and in prison at the very least. And then he had had his conversion. He had spent some 3 years, not only 3 years in Arabia where he had gone to learn more, but 3 years before he begins to go up to Jerusalem and meet with the elders and explain who he is and introduce himself. And some 14 years later, he goes back again to test and to check that his ministry is still right. Paul is adamant that God had spoken to him and given him the true message, and that had been confirmed by the other Christian leaders, the apostles of the time. And so Paul is saying, why then, under whose authority are you now changing this gospel? And he chastises them and calls them back to the true gospel. And it got me thinking about the modern church and how, in a sense, probably none of us are perfectly right in the way we do it, but so many have this belief that they are right, or their faith, their way of doing it is right, and therefore everyone else is wrong. Totally wrong. And unless you do it their way, then it's just not good enough. And I think, where is the message, the true gospel in that? None of us are perfect. But what does stand out for me is that teaching of the early apostles, that revelation given to people like Paul and James and Andrew and Peter and John, we need to hold firm to that. And we have the record in Scripture. So Scripture is the sole, most important basis of our understanding. And when in doubt, we can look at the interpretation of those early Christian fathers. And just as the people of the time were not to be led astray by those with a different message, so folks, we must not be led astray by those who come and introduce a gospel that is effectively a new gospel, because they say, no, God has told them now in this century how the church must worship, and they somehow dump the rest of history. It's not right. So folks, keep your faith solid. And I'd like to suggest that those of us from the old line, mainline churches, are certainly trying our best to remain faithful to that original message and Scripture. Beware those that pull you aside and tell you how to worship. It's very often the way they want to worship. So beware of that, because it will lead you astray. Folks, have a wonderful day, and we'll chat again tomorrow. God bless.